Howdy folks, Mr. Pashback here, and today we're talking about contrast in photography. Okay, and so with contrast, we're trying to make our pictures look better. We're trying to emphasize our subject here. And so what is contrast? Contrast, some of you guys might be able to understand is just opposites, okay? And we got to think about that term, opposites attract. Is that necessarily so? Maybe, but definitely with photography, opposites do attract. It creates some level of interest. It's pleasing to the eye for some reason, and it creates a dynamic of different ideas sometimes that just makes us look at a picture and just try to separate and kind of compare and contrast of what's going on in the photograph. Mostly it really just enhances our subject, and that's what we always want as a photographer. We want to pick our subject and boom, there it is right in our picture frame, instantly seen by the viewer, and like that's it right there, that's our subject. There's a variety of ways we can create contrast. Contrast is what we call a principle of design. It's kind of what we how we manage the art elements, and the art elements can be line, shape, color, form, and space and texture. And so we can think about different ways we can create contrast. We can also create contrast with ideas. And so what I have for you guys here in some of these examples is a variety of ways that we can create contrast. Please note that some of these are student examples. These are examples that students have submitted in the past, and quite honestly, they're pretty good when we talk about contrast here. Some of these are just examples that I pulled offline here. Okay, so I think probably the most interesting and easiest way to create contrast is look at color. Colors that pop. People love color, so that's a good one to just kind of start with and practice with contrast. So up here I have an example. This is a student example. I believe she changed the hues some way in a filter. I don't know if it's an actual green couch and an actual orange shirt. At least she pumped up the colors because those look really saturated, but nonetheless I can't tell, and so it's good. So we see a nice green couch here, and we see our subject, and we get that pop of the orange. Okay, easily seen. If the couch is green and she's wearing a green shirt, we can imagine that the subject gets pretty lost. It's like, what are we looking at here? What's the focal point? Okay, and so opposite of that, we see contrast. We can definitely tell what's going on here and what the subject is. I would like for you guys to also notice rule of thirds here, the student using rule of thirds, pushing the subject to the right, kind of opening up the space to really just kind of view the couch as the second subject here. Here's a professional example here using color, using very saturated, strong colors of the red in the background and the guy pulling the rope in this nice vivid blue suit here. Now, I chose to use this because it's kind of not really an interesting subject per se. Like this could be a picture that could be really boring. The guy's head's chopped off. He's pulling a rope. The rope itself is large, but nothing really interesting going on here. We can't really tell what it is. But that pop of the color and the contrast of that just really kind of draws interest to the subject here. Picture down here, we get the color contrast as well, but we're adding a second element here. And can you guys figure out what it is? This is like Blue's Clues. That's right, it's texture. If you guys have ever watched Blue Clues. And so we get that purple. Sorry for that, by the way. We get the purple and the yellow, and the yellow lemon, dimply, somewhat smooth, but we get that furry purplish carpet there. Not the greatest photo there, but it definitely represents the idea there. And so you guys don't have to take the greatest photos. I just really want you guys to practice with the concepts here. Okay, subject up here. believe it's a student example. I didn't have a name on it, but it looks like taking a picture through a tunnel of some sort. Could have been a slide. Notice the symmetry in here, but now we're looking at, we don't have color, we have contrast and value. So we have darks versus lights here, and it really helps us. A lot of that space is the inside of this tube here, but it really, even though the subject's really small there, we can really see it contrasted, the black silhouette contrasted against just the blank white background there. And this is also an aspect of framing, which we'll talk about in another assignment here. So the tunnel is actually framing the subject. This one I absolutely, sorry about that. Let's see if we can go back here. This was a student example, and she went on a trip. It might have been an old photo, to be honest, but you know what? It worked. And here we have contrast. Well, first, let's see what we're looking at here. We're looking at these tall buildings and these housing developments here towards the bottom. Notice rule of thirds as well. And here we got contrast of a couple things. We have size. We got really tall buildings, and just it looks like big houses, but compared to those buildings, they kind of dwarf in size there. We have contrast in form a little bit. The buildings are built more geometric than, I guess, the houses a little bit. But really, we kind of have a contrast in idea. And I don't really know if, there's a major idea here, but I think the idea here is like, people happen to kind of live in these buildings, and people happen to live in these houses. So it's just an idea of like maybe a contrast in the way different people live. That's just kind of what I get out of it. People might have a different interpretation. Focusing on that idea of idea and contrast. This one I chose, which is really definitive here, and this one I just pulled offline. Here we have contrast in a couple ways. We have contrast in value. We have, this boy here who has darker skin, really contrasted against the white pizza in the background. We can tell he's outside. He's footless. I mean, not footless, shoeless. Looks like he could be hungry. He's by himself. So just that idea of the pizza in the background kind of helps develop the idea. And then we have these people inside of the restaurant who are, obviously eating, they're clothed. And here we really get the idea of contrast, of an idea, sorry. And this is really an idea of wealth and poverty. And so you can really see that here represented in the picture. I just really love it when photographers are able to kind of grasp this without really, staging the scene, unless that photographer went over and told that boy to stand there. But sometimes you can tell, photographers are able to just really capture those moments. So, last picture here, this was another student example. Some of you guys might have like some photo editing apps on your phone, and you can kind of brush away aspects of your photo to reveal maybe just black and white, and you can create contrast in color and value, and that'd kind of be the easiest way to do it there if you do have an app. I do like the aspect of color really contrasted against black and white. Really pops in there. So a couple pointers for you. Just kind of look around. You can stage objects. Look around your physical space. If you have a garden, try to look for some flowers. The flowers can be really vivid and colorful, contrasted against, maybe the green leaves, or if you angle it a different way, you can contrast it against the light blue sky. Just kind of see what you have in your physical space and see what you can represent there. I've had students, who live with their grandparents or something. They take photos with their baby sister, in the arms of their grandfather or grandmother, and then we have contrast of an idea of old versus young, and so you can represent it that way as well. So don't forget about that conceptual idea part of concept, because sometimes that creates really interesting aspects to your photos. So that's it for contrast. Again, take lots of photos, really explore your space to see what you guys can get, and submit those photos through Canvas. Please save them as JPEGs. Of course, if you always have trouble with Canvas, you can send them straight to my email and I can get them that way. But yeah, that's it. Take care. Take lots of photos.